Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Randall Miller. I'm a member of the Social Science Committee of HASP, and we're delighted to have with us Dr. Bill Pink, who likes to be referred to as Bill. We're delighted to have him here today, president of Grand Rapids Community College. He has the full range of degrees, associate, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. His PhDs from the University of Oklahoma, and he has strong Oklahoma ties. He's also a board member on the Higher Learning Commission, which is our accrediting body. And he's a member of the board of the American Council of Education. And given all of the things that we've been through with COVID, there's so many issues that we've addressed. Some colleges and universities have done extremely well, others not so much. But Bill's going to share his observations from the mountaintop. He has a great position to share his perspective, as well as providing a personal update on the Grand Rapids campus, Grand Rapids Community College campus that will be in Holland. So without further ado, please, Bill, go ahead and share your information on higher education after the pandemic.
Randall, thank you so much, and it's good to see you, Randall, because friends, Randall is someone I consider a friend to me, and so often when these last this last year and a half of just not seeing people, Randall, is good to at least virtually see you. I want to say good morning to everyone. I bring greetings from here on campus. I'm actually here in Grand Rapids on campus here in my office. Greetings from our institution, our faculty, staff, board, and students of what I feel like is the best community college in the country. And yeah, I'm partial too. And also I would say, as GRCC is the oldest community college in the state of Michigan, one of the oldest in the country, it's just it's an honor to be the leader of this institution. What has been very evident to me over these last 6 years that I've been in Grand Rapids, the last 4 years as president, and these last 15, 16 months in days of pandemic, what's been evident to me is the importance of the work that we do here at GRCC and that many of my colleagues across the country in community colleges are doing. And here's why it's so evident. One of the things about GRCC, one of the things that we've seen a lot of personally, me personally, is that we've seen over the last 15 months, some of our friends locally and nationally really asking from a GRCC perspective, hey, what does GRCC think about this? Or could GRCC speak to this? It's been interesting to have some of our national leaders. It's been great to have our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, come to our campus just a month and a half ago to not only look at and to be a part of a vaccine clinic that we set up here in the parking lot of my building, but also in her comments about what she says about Grand Rapids Community College and what she knows. And then right before that, to have our Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, I was honored to be invited to be in on a press conference with him, to a national press conference, just talking about this wave of pandemic funding that universities and colleges are able to use now. What was so cool about that, friends, is to have the Secretary of Education in that press conference recognize Grand Rapids Community College as being, as he called it, an exemplar in how we have maneuvered through the pandemic in helping support students throughout this pandemic. And so what's been really good about that, friends, is to be reminded and realize that what we have here in West Michigan, and I say we because what we'll talk about toward the end of this presentation about the GRCC Lakeshore campus, what we have here in West Michigan as this institution is concerned, you have this resource, you have this higher ed institution that is truly seen as a national leader and is truly seen as one doing the work with its community that needs to be done. And that's a big part of the excitement of what's happening on the Lakeshore with GRCC and our Lakeshore campus, but we'll talk about that here in a second. So higher education after the pandemic. And by the way, as Susan mentioned, if you have questions, and I'm hoping that you do, because I'll present information, but then I just love to have the dialogue. I love to be able to respond to and answer questions. If you have questions during this, I'll handle all questions at the end of the presentation. But if you want to put the questions in the chat before the end, that's fine. We'll get to those. Or if you just want to hold off and either ask them via chat or just directly to me, either way is fine. I'll be responding to those at the end of our time today. So higher education after the pandemic. One of the things about this pandemic, COVID-19, is that for many higher ed institutions, doesn't matter, 2-year or 4-year schools, what we have found over the last 15, 16 months is when I talk to you about what GRCC has done to make this shift and what we're looking at for the future, what you have to realize is that many of our higher ed institutions, and I'll indicate some of this during the presentation, many of our institutions of what I say, here's what GRCC did, many of those other institutions had to do the same thing. We all had to make this shift back in March of 2020. All of a sudden, as you see on these photos, all of a sudden, we, in being an institution that has utilized online learning for decades, we had to take that notion of online learning to a totally different level. You see that picture right there where we have, in case you don't know, we have in my mind, and I'm partial, it's okay. We have in my mind the best culinary institute in the country. And if you know the Sekia Institute for Culinary Education, you will know that the people that are produced out of there as far as cooks and whether it be pastry chefs, whether it be chefs, whether it be someone who is going into business for themselves, the folks that come out of there are phenomenal, and it's a phenomenal program. That program had to go virtual back in March and into the summer and into this past school year. As you see Chef Schultz over there, that video going, that was video that was shared virtually with class and discussion during the time. That's what we had to do. And we were no exception to that rule. That's what most of my friends across the country were doing. I'd say everyone. You see there where a music class is being done virtually. We had to think, how do you think about and how do you figure out how to still stay relevant to and responsive to the needs of our students in days of a pandemic? Even to the point of what I'll talk about here in a little bit, where our food pantry on campus, we have a pantry that is maintained year round. And that food pantry is for our students. It's for students who have need and can go to that food pantry and get food either for that moment or to take home. We maintain and stock a food pantry. I can tell you, as I'll mention later, the number of visits to that food pantry during days of COVID, friends, went up quite a bit. Over the course of 2020, 2021, we saw those numbers increase drastically as far as students who had need, and we wanted to make sure we were going to help in fulfilling that need and fulfilling that gap for them if possible. So let me talk first about course delivery, because when it comes to how schools have shifted and what's on this horizon, one of the things about how institutions have shifted is that we are all asking the question. It's a question that we've been asking here at GRCC for about the past 12, 14 months. And that is, with the shifts that we are making, with the changes we have made across campus to adapt to this COVID-19 environment in education, the question we kept asking, what are those things that we need to make sure that after the pandemic, those shifts, those changes we've made, rather than just being so quick to say, okay, we got to get back to normal. We got to get back, well, maybe the true thing is that normal needs to be different than what it was pre-COVID. So the question we ask is, what things about how we have shifted, what are we doing differently that when COVID has passed, that we'll actually keep on the books, that we'll keep in terms of how we go about our business. That to me was an important point, because if we made some shifts for addressing this pandemic, what shifts do we need to say, you know what, that's working and working well, we need to consider keeping that around. So when it came to course delivery, that was the first thing. So with course delivery, what we did is that we went to 4 different modes of delivery. Traditionally, for the last 100 years or so, we have been primarily a face-to-face, in-person institution, like many of my colleagues. Then 20, 30 or so years ago, when online education started really picking up steam, our institution responded, and we were really strong on online education as well as in person, yet that in-person presence was a whole lot heavier than the online presence. Pre-COVID, friends, we were about 80% in person and about 20% online in what we were doing. When COVID hit and when we made the adjustment in fall of 2020, here's what we did. We kept that online presence as far as that traditional online class was concerned. We kept that in-person piece, but understand, because of COVID, 80% went down to about 20 to 25% as far as in-person classes were concerned. And those in-person classes maintain things like social distancing, masks, and all those things. We kept those, we got those protocols, we put them in place. But we added 2 other modes of delivery, which is indicated on this screen. So the first one, that idea of hybrid or hybrid, which is a combination of a class that was being delivered online and in person. So some of those meetings of that class, let's say it's a 16-week class, some of those meetings were here on campus, some of those meetings were online. So that what it did for some students, it just made accessibility a bit easier for them to be able to access. The online piece, that was a piece that if the class met on Tuesday from 9 to 10, as far as in-person is concerned, when it went to the online piece, it wasn't online, hey, your online meeting no, it had online components to it that they could do on their own. And so what that did for many students is that it made us more accessible, and in some cases made a lot of students just feel a bit more safe, secure from a health perspective. That hybrid delivery was effective. But the last one you see there, virtual, that virtual delivery of class instruction, virtual, the definition for no better description is what you and I are doing right now. A class that would meet at 9:30 in the morning, and it would meet via Zoom. And so everyone logged in, instructor admitted everyone in, class is done via the screen, 9 to 10, hey, 10 o'clock's here, class is over. It was delivery as an in-person class, yet it was virtual. Now before, that was very rare on our campus. And I think you could even say that before March of 2020, how many of you had really heard of what Zoom was, right? So all of a sudden now, that virtual environment and Microsoft meetings, Microsoft Teams, Google Meets, everyone knew there was something called WebEx, but who really used it? Well, now we know WebEx a whole lot better. So with that virtual component, that is that mode that we say for students who just want to have that via a Zoom delivery. We did that for them. And friends, this is what I mean by what do we keep afterwards? Those 4 delivery modes, we will continue to do that, I think, even well after COVID-19 is no longer a worry for our campus. Because what we have found out is that some students who probably really couldn't even access us as well prior to COVID, now, as we have refashioned some of what we are doing, there are other students that say, you know what, now I can go to GRCC because my schedule now allows for me to be able to do a hybrid class, a virtual class. Then we also have those students who say, I'm not coming to school unless I can access that class in person. That's how I learned best. We want to make sure now, as we have looked at these modes and as we've learned from these delivery modes, we want to make sure that students who need to access us in these ways, that they are indeed able to do so. That's what a lot of my friends across the country are doing as well. When you talk about higher ed after the pandemic, this is what's happening. Not just these four, but we're even finding out other delivery modes, other delivery models that make good sense for a population of students. And if we can do all we can to be responsive to those students and those needs, that's what we want to do. So course delivery is important, but also, how do we support students outside the class? Well, when the pandemic hit, when we saw the need for going from, and what we did, when you look at those four modes and you just look at it from a standpoint of how much of that delivery is virtual and how much of that delivery is here on campus, we actually flipped our campus. Because pre-COVID, I told you, 80% in person, 20% online. What we did this last year is that we flipped the campus to be about 75% virtual and online and about 25% in person, because of how we had to space our classrooms, how we had to use larger spaces for physical distancing. And we actually had to flip that. And when you flip it to where you're so heavy on the tech side, on the virtual side, you need to make sure that you're providing as much technology for your students as possible. So what you see there is as some of the stimulus dollars started to come to higher ed to help out with some of this, what we were able to do, and many of my colleagues across the country, we went into the mode of purchasing laptops so that we could loan those laptops out to students, so that our students, if they needed to access our virtual or online classes, yet did not have technology at home, we made available for them the ability to just borrow, rent, whatever you want to call it, there's no charge, to be able to borrow and check out laptops. And you also see on there the idea of what a mobile hotspot. So that mobile hotspot is also one of those means that is the connection for that laptop. So now that's providing the Wi-Fi signal, if you will. The laptop is there. What we did is that we went into a major mode of purchasing these so that our student body, those who needed it, who were telling us, I can't access you, I need this, I need a device, we were able to do so. One of the things that I saw pre-COVID, in understanding where some of our students are when it comes to technology, one thing that we saw with our students before COVID even happened was that some of our students were coming to school, they did not have means as far as technology is concerned. A computer, laptop. If they were going to have a computer to use, they were going to have to come here to campus to use one of our computer labs, or go to the library, and we had several laptops there that they could borrow, check out. But it was really telling to me about the technology needs of some of our students when pre-COVID days, I was told about a student who went through one of our English composition classes, and all the papers and things that he had to do to turn in for that class, all of them were done on his phone. Papers, can you imagine doing your a composition paper, writing a term paper, and the way he was doing it was on his phone. That was the only technology he had at home. And so we quickly realized, if that was the case pre-COVID, what does it look like for those students now who that's the only means that they can access us, is to try to access us via the online or virtual? We quickly realized the importance of being able to provide technology for as many students as possible, and the students used them. They were being checked out. We were getting into spaces where we were needing to get more of those laptops out, and then at the end of the semester be able to get those back in. And so what we knew there is that the student need is vital. But when I also talk about student support, I told you earlier, we have a student pantry, and we saw our student pantry visits go up incredibly from what they were pre-COVID. What you see there are two of our great GRCC family members, Sandy Gregory and Lina Blair. They would the ones who are in charge of our food pantry. And what we did, again, what do you learn in times of crisis? They transitioned that pantry from not only being food, but then we started also having donations come to us for personal items, hygiene items. There was one organization, I believe, that even gave children's toys for families that were that had that, but children not having much in terms of toys to play with, especially in days of COVID, when everything shut down back in March, April of 2020. That pantry stayed open. And what they did is that they just did a drive-through, a curbside delivery for students who said, I need food, because many of our students' friends, many of our students were without job. Many of them had to be at home with family, had to take care of kids, because now kids are at home trying to learn. Think about that. If you're a student here and you don't have much technology to begin with, now you need a computer, now you need some internet access. You're at home and you have 3 little ones, 2 little ones who also need that because their schools were virtual. Now you start getting the picture of what some of our students were going through. So if we can, as the institution, if we can do all we can to help support that, we wanted to do that. And so you see there with the student pantry, the work that happens out of there is not only phenomenal, but is very needed in terms of what some of our students experience. And that work is ongoing. So let me transition a little bit here and move to some things that we know about how higher ed and how we at the college and other colleges and universities across the country, what is that shift starting to look like? Because again, what you learn in days of crisis, what do you keep and move on after days of crisis? So what we saw even pre-COVID and then started working even more so is the question of how can we have more accelerated course options? In other words, instead of a traditional 15 or 16 week class, how can we condense that into a 7-week offering? So that now if I'm a student coming to GRCC and I'm thinking about what the traditional semester looks like from this fall, from late August to December, in that 15, 16 weeks, if I, instead of just getting 2 classes in or 3 classes in that semester period, maybe I can get more classes by saying the first 7 weeks, I'll do 2 classes. The second 7 weeks, I'll do 2 additional classes. Now, what we've done is that we are starting to, again, accelerate those course options. And for that term and semester, those students are still utilizing financial aid and all those things. But what it has done is that it starts to allow for students to be able to accelerate the number of courses within that time frame, so that in many cases it can help them move along faster to get through this associate degree or this certificate or whatever they're seeking with us. We have started looking a lot harder at that. We put out many of those classes, and we'll continue to roll those because of helping students access us at a more accelerated level. And then obviously, without question, what I mentioned earlier, online and virtual program development and growth. One of the things the pandemic has done is that it has caused many of us, if we're paying attention, if they were paying attention, they being higher ed institutions, it has caused us to really think about the quality of those online offerings. Because all of a sudden now, when it's the only thing you had out there, of 70-75% of your classes are virtual or online, it really then started saying, what's the quality? How accessible is it? How does learning happen with those? Is it relevant, and is it being responsive? And that has been, I think, for all of us, a good barometer check for us. And from our standpoint, it has given us good reason to to really look at and improve much of that virtual and online offering. We at the college here been looking looking a whole lot harder weekend college. What does it look like to have just a weekend offering where, and again, how does that refer to COVID-19 and pandemic? What the pandemic did is that the pandemic made all of us look closer at what we do. It makes everyone reconsider, is this the best way to do it? One of the things that we have been talking about prior to COVID-19 that I think now becomes an even stronger conversation. How do we help reach those students that Monday through Friday, they work, they've got family, they just can't access us, that we now look at what weekend college looks like, that it's a Saturday offering, it's a Saturday, Sunday, it's something on the weekend that is more accessible for a population that can't access us otherwise. So that's something that, again, post-COVID allows us to dig into deeper. And many of you have heard of prior learning assessment. Excuse me. You've heard of prior learning assessment where a student, if they have been, PLA takes advantage of their work experience prior to coming to school. So if it's a person who is coming to us and let's say they've been a manager at a local department store, been a manager for the past 5-10 years, taking what learning that they gained from that experience and being able to equate that to college credit. So I've been a manager, been doing this for 10 years. Well, chances are there are a lot of management competencies that person already has because of the job. So doing an evaluation of those, and then after that evaluation process, being able to then award that student college credit based on their prior learning. That is something that many colleges and universities that we've been all diving into. I think post-pandemic is going to push us to dive into even deeper, which I think is a good thing. And then the last thing I say there is to get past what I call the either or proposition. And here's what I mean by that. And I think you've probably heard this said. Over the last several years, you hear this thing of either or. Either a student is going to go to the community college and get something in a skill or a trade or something in the trades, or they're just going to go to a university or somewhere to get a degree. And somehow we have decided to separate those things when we talk about it, because that's all I've heard. I've heard people talk about, well, you could go over and do something at the community college to get a skilled trade, or maybe you just want to go to college and get this degree. Well, we have to make sure that we understand that does not have to be an either or proposition. Here at our institution, that's a both and. That is a student who can go and get a welding certificate, and that welding certificate that they get here at GRCC, that it does count toward their progression toward an associate degree and eventually toward a bachelor's degree. That we don't look at this as being this whole either or, because what COVID has also shown us reminded us of, is that some of those conversations around the need of skilled trades and the trades, that is just as, if not more important today than it was pre-COVID. And let's not just think of that as this training over here and this education over there. No, that can be a both and. And at this institution at GRCC, it is a both and. So a student can come to us and get a machining certificate, and that machining certificate turn into a machining degree, then go to a 4-year school that says, yep, we get it. And they take that on, and that student can, at some point, if they want to, go ahead and pursue that bachelor's degree. Many students who come into a welding program here at GRCC, they may come into that welding program and their thought is, I just want to be a welder. Well, we give them that training, we they get to a job. 5-10 years down the road, they start thinking, do I really want to hold the fire for the rest of my career? Or do I want to, at this company I've been working at, because I see what management looks like and I think I could do that? That's where I want to go with this. I don't want to hold the fire for the rest of my life. So that progression that they've made with that welding certificate and or degree here at GRCC, it carries credit credential with it. Credit currency is what I like to call it. it carries that currency that moves them toward a degree. And so to make sure, as you're talking about this stuff in your circles, to make sure people get rid of this either or thinking of either you're going to do this, the skill trades, or you're not, or you're going to pursue a degree. You can do both. And that is the beauty of the community college. It's the beauty of the community college having great partners, four-year partners that understand that and will take those students to move them on to a bachelor's degree. But it's also the beauty of the community college that we are partnered with those companies and businesses, employers who want to see that happen, those opportunities, if that's what that student wanted to go toward. One of the things I just call promising opportunities that our college right now is realizing this summer. Right now, when people ask me, Bill, how's enrollment going? How's enrollment looking? GRCC over the past year, when you look at the data, we look exactly this past year like what national data says from community colleges, which is community colleges nationally as a whole, we were 8 to 10% down in enrollment nationally. GRCC looked exactly that way over the last year during COVID, where our enrollment fall and winter, we were about 8 to 10% down from the previous year. What we see this summer in summer session, our second summer session is going on right now. And what we have seen for the summer is that our enrollment for the summer is up, but it is not only up, it is up not only from last year of during the summer of COVID, it is up from the previous summer, pre-COVID. We're still about 5 to 7% higher than we were pre-COVID this summer because we're starting to see folks come back in. But what you see on the screen, these are two reasons why some of those folks are coming back into our doors. Futures for Frontliners is a grant opportunity for students, and those who qualify for Futures for Frontliners are individuals who, when we as a state, back in March and April of 2020, when we shut down as a state, those individuals, because of what job they were working, that kept working and stayed and kept on working, they were those frontline employees. Those folks, when they proved that they were still working to the state, that Futures for Frontliners will pay the tuition for them to attend community college. It's last dollar tuition. They got to fill out their financial aid information and all that. But Futures for Frontliners pays for that, and that's the state saying thank you to those people. And then the Reconnect grant, Michigan Reconnect, that is for individuals who are 25 years old and older, some or no college at all, and no degree. If they fit those three criteria here in the state of Michigan, they are also eligible for last dollar community college tuition. And so what we're seeing, friends, is that not only are we seeing this summer people getting back out and getting back into school, getting back into this college pathway, but we're also seeing those two efforts helping tremendously in folks being able to access us from a financial perspective. Those two things are really accounting a lot for what we're seeing enrollment-wise this summer. And the thing I preach all the time to our collaborations is that our partnerships that we have, partnerships matter, and partnerships are going to matter even more as we dig out of COVID-19. Partnerships that we form as colleges and universities are concerned, partnerships that we all form with our communities, with our business and employers, with our K-12 partners, with our community-based organizations. All of these partnerships, if they mattered before, which they did, they are going to really matter as we continue to dig out of COVID. The 2 points I always talk about with this, we have to make sure post-COVID, as we're digging out now, that we get companies back to work. So that means partnerships with companies that will be imperative, that we are getting our companies back up and running at levels that either are at or rival what they were pre-COVID. And when I say back up and running, I just mean that they're getting their workforce back, they're getting their operations back strong. Many of those who are still going, they were hit hard. We need to now, through these partnerships as a community college and other universities are concerned, that we need to help those companies get back up and running. And the way you get them back up and running, one of those ways is to get people back to work. During the pandemic, we had estimates as high as almost 30% unemployment in the state of Michigan. That number has started coming down finally, but we have got to keep digging at that to get folks back into the world of work and get them comfortable with being back in the world of work. And I say, when I hear partners, when people ask me, hear me talk about partnerships, well, Bill, who do we partner with? And partner with who? I say everybody. You bring as many partners to the table so that we can all get together to make sure that our collective impact is truly impactful. So coming out of COVID-19 for higher ed institutions, technology is really prevailing in a way that asks us in higher ed the question of how we are fully utilizing technology. There are regional implications to this when it comes to higher ed, community college to four-year school, regional implications from a standpoint of, are we able to show strong education and career pathways to our students? Because if they're not seeing that, friends, they're not going to stay. They're going to go somewhere else. If we're not able to really show them, here's what that education pathway looks like from your high school to your two-year to your four-year institutions. Here's how that pathway looks. But that pathway sits right alongside the career pathway of what that education is preparing you for. Because if we're not providing that smooth pathway for students, think about what happens. Students will go to college or university somewhere outside our region. You tell me, you think about it. How hard is it for someone who decides to leave West Michigan and go to school in Wyoming, Wisconsin, Indiana? When they go to school somewhere else, it is that much more difficult for us to get those people back. My idea, the thing I've talked to our four-year schools about here in West Michigan is, if we want to prevent the brain drain from happening, we've got to make sure there are clear pathways for our students, for our individuals, our community folks here in West Michigan to not only be here in West Michigan for their higher education, but stay here. I want my GRCC students to stay around West Michigan, because I know that when they leave West Michigan, there's a good chance that they may not come back. And so there are regional implications that we need to think about. And also, as we said, think about what I call the new abnormal in the workplace, because I'm very strong against saying we need to get back to normal, because that makes the assumption that normal was the best way to do it. And we have learned so much during the pandemic that there are some things that we do now that are actually better than they were. So I call it the new abnormal, and that's where we need to get to. Briefly, I encourage you to look at, if you hadn't already, I mentioned this at the LEDA summit during my presentation there, but I was blessed to be part of the Governor's Student Recovery Advisory Council work that happened over the course of several months this past spring. And the result of that work was the Michigan Blueprint for Comprehensive Student Recovery. The web address is down there. I can also leave that for you, of that document. If you Google it, you'll find it. But the work of that group came up with several recommendations to the state as far as how to really dig us from an education perspective, dig out of where COVID has put us. A lot of it was K-12 information, but as being the higher ed, the post-secondary representative on that commission, on that council, part of my job was to really talk about that transition, that post-secondary transition, how we need to strengthen that. And we talked about students with what we called unfinished learning, which, looking at students who back in March of 2020, all the way through this past spring, many of those are students across the state. Some of them never saw a classroom ever again. Some of them were virtual the whole time. Some of them were virtual in and out. Some of them were on campus a little bit, not. So we believe, and we know, we see information that tells us that there was some unfinished learning there in some ways. So here at the college, we took it upon ourselves with the help from some dollars to be able to provide a summer bridge program to help bridge some of that learning for some of our local students. And that was a part of that blueprint work. And the other thing was just to strengthen the access to to high quality post-secondary pathways. In other words, to help students really clearly understand what a 2-year, a 4-year, a skilled trade school, a career, or even military service, are those opportunities, and to make sure that our students can re-engage post-pandemic in knowing what those options are and what the value of those options, and to be clear with what that looks like. The work that we were able to do, I encourage you again to go out and see that that blueprint. A lot of heavy information there. Toward the final part of my presentation, I'm going to start taking questions here in a sec. Some things that to end my time in talking about from a higher ed perspective nationally, these are the questions that are facing higher ed institutions going into fall of 2021. The idea of vaccines. I don't know if you've seen it. A lot of institutions right now thinking about what, to require it or not to require it of students. What does that look like? There are some institutions across the country who have just said anybody coming to campus as far as faculty, staff, students will have to be vaccinated. Others are saying, nope, not going to do that. Some of us, and I think GRCC falls into this category, are being mindful of what particular areas do we need to be more concerned about that we might need to say, well, you need to really have this done. And so that's kind of what we're reviewing right now. I'm not interested in, at this point, I'm not interested in saying everybody on campus has I'm not at that point in this whole discussion. What I am at is to say, are there some things that really make sense for certain populations of students who are working a lot with the public, some of our healthcare programs, for example. We know that many of our healthcare providers are requiring it of their employees. If our students are going to be in there doing clinicals, we probably need to seriously think about what that could look like. So that's where we and others are landing on this as well. But that's a big thing right now with higher ed institutions. How are we going to deliver courses? I showed you what ours looks like. I think that's going to be the way we look for a long time to come, but at varying levels, depending on which one you're talking about. Protocols on campus. Some campuses going through, will we have masks? Will we have distancing? That's a question that many campuses are dealing with right now and asking themselves, what do we want to look like when it comes to fall? And then finally, student supports. What supports will our students really tell us that they are needing, and are we meeting those student supports to the best of our abilities? So these are the things that many of us are seeing. And then the final thing I'll show you, as I mentioned before, we are very excited. When you talk about post-pandemic, GRCC, one of the biggest things that we are doing in preparing for fall of 2021 is the opening of our GRCC Lakeshore campus. The pictures you see here are renderings, and if you drive by there, you can see how this is starting to look in real time. That facility is very close now to being finished. We actually have a lot of our equipment in there already. What's exciting to me, one of the things exciting to me about this facility, several things are, number one, I love the location and I love the area we are in. But let me tell you one of the things I really love about it. Under this one roof, and I think when we have this facility completed, this will be one of the premier education facilities in West Michigan and possibly even across our state, because of how meticulous the planning has been to make this facility happen. What is so cool about it, and that's I don't have data to tell you that's president speak saying it's going to be one of the best. But one of the things that's cool about this facility, friends, is that under one roof, and you don't have this very often. You don't see this at very many places in higher education. Some places, yes, but not as many. Under one roof, you will have students going to English classes, science classes. Some of those science classes, there's a cadaver lab in that building where we'll have cadaver-based science classes. You'll have students going for history class, all those students under the same roof, with students going to class for welding, machining, automation. All those classes as well will be under one roof in this building. So now I'll have interaction with students that normally don't interact together. They'll be sitting in the commons area eating lunch, just grabbing something to eat, or just sitting there studying for a class, where you'll have a young lady who may be in our welding class and a young man sitting there who's going to English class. And that interaction just doesn't happen very often. I love that interaction. I love the fact that an English student is going to walk through that building and look into these huge glassed in areas and see students working on machining projects. They've never seen that before, but they're going to be able to see the breadth. And now I have this automation student in an automation class, in a CAD class. I have him or her walking out of that class, and they look over here, and there's a student leaving a cadaver lab, having just worked on something that they're working on, probably either nursing or even pre-med. So the breadth of what will be offered in that space, in my mind, is just, it'll be phenomenal. Our grand opening will happen in August. I will make it a point to make sure that each of you have invitation to that will have an invitation to come to that grand opening and to see that facility, because I feel very confident that when you see that facility, you will be proud that you have a Lakeshore campus that is ready to service students at a level that this college has never serviced in Holland, in Ottawa County. I'm thrilled at what that's going to be. I love the fact that it's on a bus line, because accessibility is paramount to those students. So that's my email address is there. Just because I take some questions with you today and then all of a sudden drop off of a Zoom conversation, that doesn't mean you can't email me for other questions or whatever. Please make sure you know that and see that if you need to use that at any point. That's what that email address is for, so that you can, if you have questions or anything that you want to dialogue about, I'm always happy to do so. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I would love to answer any questions you might have this morning.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I'm going to pop in and read some questions from the chat. And your presentation was so thorough that you actually answered many of them along the way, acknowledged by the question asker. But I'll see if you've answered it, just go ahead and we'll pass to the next one. Have you had experience, David's asking, being able to recruit guest speakers for lectures from far away geographically as a beneficial result of virtual learning?
Great question. We've been able to do that, and I would say has been domestic, how we've been able to pull that off. So we have been able to have folks from different parts of the country that I think one of the examples I give, we have for years, we've had our diversity lecture series on campus. That diversity lecture series brings in about 3 or 4 national speakers every year. Typically that's been bringing them in physically to speak here in Grand Rapids and in West Michigan. But since the pandemic, that diversity lecture series was virtual, but it enabled us to still have some folks from the DC area in different parts of the country, I think California was one, to be able to still make presentation to our campus community without having to make the trip. And so that has been, and what that has done for us, David, I'll say this, not only did that enable us to do it during pandemic days, but what it also taught us, again, what do you learn in days of crisis, is that we can still do that after it's over, right? We can still say, you know what, let's bring that person in virtually and have a crowd in a lecture hall or in one of our spaces here, listening to that person, having the dialogue interaction. And then what we've been able to pull off as well, some people who are virtual themselves in that, and then be able to expand, thereby expanding who we can invite to be the speaker, but also expand who we invite to be able to attend. So it's been really cool to be able to do it that way. We've had presentations that we've had almost 1,000, close to 1,000 people attend because they can do it virtually and listen to a national speaker. So definitely in pandemic days, yes, after pandemic days, still yes.
Thank you. Who does the PAL assessments? And that would be the first part of that question. And second part might be, is there resistance from four-year institutions about creative ideas like PAL?
So talking about that prior learning assessment. So good question. So with prior learning, I have a coordinator on campus who really gets that information in and then disseminates it to the particular faculty. So you have a student who comes in and wants to apply for prior learning assessment because of this real world experience they've had in manufacturing. If that's the case, now that it comes into that coordinator then looks at that person who creates, kind of sends some specific information we ask for, becomes kind of a portfolio for the most part. That coordinator looks at it, then determines what faculty member that needs to go to. So now the faculty member gets their hands on it and is able to work with the student, say, well, here's what this is, here's what we do in this class is. So then the faculty is making that decision as to what that class, what class credit gets in there. It is noted there on the transcript. We've had very little, I think PLA had a lot of four-year resistance early on. I think we're seeing some of that resistance dissipate just because of the acknowledgement that, you know what, we got to be real about this. We've got to be able to be as responsive to students as possible. Why would I want to send a student through a class that they, in some cases, have just as much expertise as the instructor standing in front of them because of what they've been doing the last 10 years of their life. So why make them go through that, pay that money? And that, for us, it is a deal. For the four-year school, it's a big deal when you're asking a student to pay four-year tuition for a class that student is going, okay, but I already have this, I already know this. So that becomes a bigger deal for the student because it digs into their pocketbook a whole lot more than it digs into it with us. So four-year institutions, we've been able to get to a better place with them. I don't hear nearly the kind of rattling that I used to hear early on in the days of PLA.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that's a great lead into the next question regarding economics. Is tuition different for virtual versus online versus in person? Let's see. No, I'm sorry. Is tuition different for virtual versus in-person courses?
No, it's all it's all the same.
Yeah.
Our price point stays the same. What we do have is the difference. If there is a difference, we have, if a person is taking online classes, we have and this is very consistent with probably every college or university I know of. There's typically an online fee. If you're going to take online classes, there's a fee attached to that class that's aside from tuition, a small fee, because there's the technology side of what infrastructure that has to go into and all the technology pieces to maintain. So usually there's an online fee involved. It's a very nominal fee with classes that are online. What we were able to do during pandemic days, and I think we're even going to be able to pull it off this fall, is that because of how many online classes that we've had to run, we've waived that online fee so that students do not have to pay that. I mean, when you have 75% of your students over the last year, when you have 75% taking online classes because that's mostly what was being offered, that gets expensive. That starts generating some dollars there that we said, you know what, with some of the stimulus dollars that we've been able to access, let's just use those stimulus dollars to pay that online fee and let's not put that upon our students. And so we've been able for about now, this will be, I want to say this is going to be the third semester in a row, I believe the third, maybe in fourth this fall, that we've been able to waive that online fee.
Thank you. So that's it for the chat. If anyone would like to just unmute themselves, and there you go, Randall.
Yes, I just an additional comment and question. Bill, you mentioned the Michigan blueprint for comprehensive student recovery. I just went on my other computer here, and if you just Google that, the entire report comes up. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can gain easy access to it. And thank you very much for sharing that. The other kind of a fun question, as you were going through on the hospitality program, I also just quickly Googled your program. It looks like the restaurant is back open. Is that correct?
It will be open this fall. We actually kept it open during COVID. And here's how we had it open, Randall. This is fun. In the dead of winter this last year, when COVID is just surging up and down, and it's cold outside and all those things. Our culinary school, our heritage restaurant here on campus, which is a phenomenal restaurant. What our culinary program did is they utilized some of you guys probably saw them, the bubbles that people were using to that some restaurants had on the outside of their restaurant, those big bubbles that you could sit inside and still have a meal. All right, we had several of those at our restaurant. Had a heater in there with it. Me and my wife and daughter were the first one. I said, you know what? I need to step out and be the leader here. So we went over, and the first night they had those offered, we went in and had dinner outside in that bubble. And so that's how creative. And the thing about it, that's real world for our students, because if they were working in the industry, that's probably what they would have been doing. And so, and either cooking for it or serving for it. So making adjustments like that, Randall, we were able to do throughout the pandemic. We drastically reduced the number of people that could eat in the restaurant at one time, but still were able to keep it open. And it should be fully open this fall. It's a fall, and it's a semester to semester opening with the Heritage. So summertime is shut down, but it will be open this fall, and I think we'll probably be close to our capacity at that point. And that's exciting, because I can't tell you how many times I would go over there to have dinner, because I wanted to support them and have our students and our faculty over there say that how happy they were that they were still able to be on campus in the classes and in that Heritage restaurant, which is that's a learning lab. And so come on over, have a good meal, tell me you're coming, and I'll come eat with you.
Oh, terrific. And we'll check the days just to be sure. We know the days that you're open and the hours, but yes, I'll give you a tip off. And thank you so much for such a comprehensive report. As Bill mentioned, we're friends, been friends for many years, and I've worked in higher education a long time, and what he has covered here, he really did cover the waterfront in terms of the challenges that we've faced, and I was so delighted to see the positive things that you focused on and emphasized, because there are a lot of pluses that have come out of this experience. Obviously, it's been a challenge, and there's a downside, but there's also a very, very strong upside that will impact higher education for probably forever. That's you summarized that beautifully.
Well, and I appreciate that, Randall. And I will say that the days that we are in right now, and that we are getting ready to embark upon this fall, I think these are some of the most important days that I've seen in my career, from a standpoint of how we, as I've said to my leadership team, how we as an institution make sure that we are moving out of reactionary mode into proactive mode, so that we aren't just feeling like all we're doing is reacting, because we have to do that anyway all the time. Anyway, right. It's higher ed. We're always in reactionary mode. But these last 15 months, I got to tell you, it was as if, there were days where we would put a plan in place, and before the plan was implemented, something came down from Lansing that said, now you got to do this. And we had to shift. And so we were so in reactionary mode that if you do that too long, it becomes just the way you think. And I just don't want that to happen. And so Now we've been able to do a lot during days of pandemic where we've been progressive and proactive in doing some things. Now it's time for us to really blow that out of the water. I think one of the coolest things about that proactive mode and progressive mode, I think one of the best things that we have going for us, among other things, is what we're doing with GRCC Lakeshore Campus. So that to me is keeping us in a good place of progressing into a community at a level that this college has never dedicated ourselves to before.
Well, and just final comment from me. I've worked for a multi-campus community college district for many, many years. And I hope the citizens of Holland come to recognize and appreciate what you're doing there, because this is no small achievement, no small endeavor to reach out and create this campus in an area that's not part of your tax-paying district. It's very, very significant, and what you described of it in terms of what it will include. It's substantial, and it will be a tremendous asset to Holland, and it's really a testament to Bill, to your leadership to do that, because not everybody could do that, and it really takes a lot of creativity and astute management of resources to make this happen.
Well, thank you for that, Randall. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to get to the grand opening and show it off, because that's going to be that's a cool place.
Are there any other questions before we close that anybody's thought of? David, you're muted.
The classic Zoom error. I'm sorry, my dog had to go out, so I may have missed this if you spoke to it. But you're talking about the cross-pollination that can happen with one roof, exposing students to each other in very, very different trajectories. And that does sound really exciting and very unusual. Is there anything you can do even further to encourage that, like having an English classroom right next door to the, sort of not doing the traditional thing about having different buildings?
One of the things that is that you will notice in that building, David, when you go visit, that helps that cross-pollination that you just mentioned. When you go into the main entrance, there's a main entrance that will be very prominent. Several entrances around the building, but one of the main entrances, when you walk in that building, it doesn't matter, what class you're going to, you walk in that particular door, and you are looking at a wide open space that has different seating opportunities, different just places students can sit, but directly in front of you is a huge, down the way, and so, across the building, you see a large glassed-in area, and what you will see are those machining, training machining machines. You'll see the welding lab. It's all glassed in so that everyone can look in there and see it. So when you walk in the door, you're going to English class, but you can walk in and go, oh my goodness, look at that. And it almost pulls you in to say, I need to see what that's all about. So that the visual that that our architect and that construction folks, the visual they have created in that building and the visuals are really well thought out, and I think very powerful. And so some of that situated as far as where those classrooms are, that's going to happen organically, because for one thing, you're only talking about 50,000 square foot space. So there is some, there's some close proximity, but when you walk in there, you feel like, my goodness, look at this place. So and what's also cool about it is the project director for the construction company is a GRCC alum, and so he's kind of taking it a bit personal to make sure that that this is done well and done right. I think his degree was in something totally different than what he's doing now, which I think is a lot of our stories. But he's really taken it a bit personal to make sure that this is done and done well. So that's been very advantageous if you can get one of your own to oversee it.
Great. Are there any other questions before we close out? Well, thank you, Bill, so very, very much. I think we all got a lot out of this. We really, really appreciate what you've shared here today.
And we look forward to getting that invitation to the grand opening.
Yes, indeed.
I
Oh, you
think that
will.
I think that HASP has been grappling with some of the exact same issues, and these lifelong learners have modified, and we've modified our approach, and we're just looking forward to seeing great examples of leadership in our community and in education. And I personally, as we talked about before the class started, just feel super honored that GRCC is going to be located, nestled right in our backyard. So with that, if there are no other questions or comments, we do thank you so much. And why don't you stay on for well, actually, I have your email address and we'll connect, and I'll CC our director, and we'll look forward to kind of watching for an announcement on that. So everybody have a wonderful day. If you're in the afternoon class, I'll see you then.
And
you
anything
very
I can
much.
get to you, any of you, you have my email address. If you need this slide deck, Susan, I'll send that to you as well.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. And y'all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Bill. Thanks for your
Thanks.
time.
Bye.
Thanks, Randall.
All right, you're quite welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll have a nice day.